Thank you for taking the time to participate in this conference to talk a little bit about public policies and infrastructure. Infrastructure, as we all know, is a limiting factor for producers, for farmers, for the rural life, for the roads, traffic on the roads, railroads. So we are going to talk about rural roads and the riverway. And we know that the infrastructure is a limiting factor for farmers, but let's put an optimistic hat on and think that production will increase, that we can get to 2 billion tons of production increase, beef and other types of cattle production. So the idea of this panel is to talk a little bit about two topics. First of all, the diagnosis, set the issue, and then think about solutions from different points of view following this panel proposed by Aapresid. Daniel, what about the current situation of rural roads among farmers? You are a farmer. They always complain about the condition of rural roads. It's a question that it's present in all the provinces. From your point of view, which are the underlying problems for maintaining rural roads? Is it from an engineering, technical point of view? It's not just about the condition, but also the use and the maintenance. So when we talk about rural roads, let me approach this from a management point of view, because rural roads are soil sections, sections of the territory that Argentina, in the case of Argentina, we are talking about 800,000 hectares, and we use the roads to connect millions of hectares. So we can consider the roads of land management. And as David mentioned, what about the diagnosis and how to manage rural roads? Well, for the past 60 years, this management is based on permanent removals of soils from edge to edge and eliminating the weeds or the grasses. That is to say, the value of the management is directly related to that condition of the road and the frequency of removing. So the gates inside the farm, let's say, farmers value how frequent the equipment or the machines clean the rural roads. So how that is performed, which are the tools used? Well, we talk basically about leveling equipment. If we, for example, we have graders or motor graders, which are similar to till equipment, and then we have other type of equipment that is similar to non-till equipment. And then we have the tasks. And then how do we call these tasks? Well, reconstruction of roads, side or lateral removal of the soil to replace these areas, profiling, and removing the prints. And more or less, we manage roads inside the farm the same way as outside the gate of the farm. The 800,000 hectares go from Rosario to Buenos Aires, and the width is approximately 14 to 15 kilometers on both sides of the highway. Now, with today's diagnosis and our knowledge about sustainable agriculture, let's think of the following landscape, these 800,000 hectares with different soils, the different type of equipment, right, that we use for farming. And we try to keep everything brown. It could also be red or other colors in our soils. So what would be the landscape if we use all these equipment? We will see flying dust, flying soil depending on the winds, and we will see the different prints, rotting, and even if I use the truck, I have a dry print because I reduced the density of the soil by mechanical means. And then I do compactation. What do we see in rural roads when they are allegedly improved or worked? We see soil flying, dust clouds, and rotting on dry area. Now we see the rain. And it took me a long of time to get into the farm because the soil was loosened. And we also had the rotting and soil issues. Outside the farm, we have the same problems. Instead of waiting or taking long to get in, we inhibit traffic. That is to say, how are we going to prohibit without options? That is counterintuitive with increasing transitability. And what about erosion? What happens inside the farm? Let's consider 1 year. I'm also an agricultural engineer. But if we are going to assess the soil after rain, we will see laminar erosion in no-till and furrow and the different types of holes in the, or we will see cuts, sawmills, holes, and washboards. The same type of conditions and the same reasons. But we are thinking about another diagnosis. Inside the farm and outside the farm, we keep the same no-till type of farming. We continue with the assessment and we say, okay, what about soil horizons? Well, in the past, we talk about layers. Let's call it Horizon A. Now, as we have assessed, it's lower due to the erosion. And all the roads in Argentina that have a certain degree of intervention, all the layers are below the farm layer. Therefore, there is a significant or critical degradation. And there is another word that is the opposite, basically. Inside the farm, we have a clear idea or a clear understanding, particularly now due to our knowledge of sustainability. We know how to manage agriculture when it is degrading or if it is being maintained or improving. However, outside the farm, the practices are maintenance alone. And actually, it's not maintenance, but degradation. And if we are degrading instead of maintaining, the ones that have asphalt or everything that shows that the roads have asphalt. The rate, at least in Santa Fe, the stabilization rate is less than 0.5%. So if in the province of Santa Fe we have 66,000 kilometers to have a 0.5 rate, we need 330 kilometers a year. So each of you can do the acid test. And the conclusion is that 99.5% is being degraded and 0.5 is being stabilized. And what is the equation? Well, what we need to consider is that 200 times more degradation than stabilization. That doesn't hit the news because we haven't talked about sustainability, and from a sustainability point of view, we don't address the management of rural roads. So the bottom line is that transitability of roads in Argentina's main problem have to do with the diagnosis, that is to say, the knowledge that we need to manage the roads. And after severe consequences, we move from non-till farming to direct farming. The same conclusion when we talk about land management. We need to move from the conventional management that existed for the past 60 years to a sustainable road management. And then we are going to talk more about your specific proposal. Franco has to do, we'll talk about rural infrastructure in Córdoba. You talk about 66,000. What about Córdoba?
In Córdoba, there are 58,000. So my question is, now that we are talking about diagnosis and issues, which are the problems you face when to maintain, or improve such a wide network with the climate issues, population commitment, limited resources? Well, we have faced the same issues David has mentioned. I'd like to follow up on what he was saying. There are no gates. Rural roads are outside the gates, but they are not something apart from the farms. No, that's wrong. In many cases, in Córdoba, the roads are a consequence of what we do in our farms as farmers and our behaviors. So first of all, we should forget about gates. Roads are part of a farm. If we use a systematic approach for the farms, but if we don't properly manage the roads, there will be degradation. We have canals nowadays and not roads. And if this is the case, the water will still go to the roads, and it's a never-ending story. In Córdoba, we have a system of consortia where we have a consortium for the comprehensive management of basins, to have a more comprehensive management. We have several consortia working together, the one for roads, for water management, and a third one. So we consider what happens in the farms, in the basins, and how that impacts the road, and what we do with the water surplus. This is a way we start working to reduce degradation of rural roads. And I was the chairman of roads consortia for 10 years, and I was in charge of maintenance. But if we don't stabilize the roads in some way using gravel or sand, the dirt flies away or is taken away by the water. And the only way we can prevent this from happening is, well, maybe allowing for the roots to grow into that area, that is grasses or other kinds of weeds, or using sand or gravel. If you have a network which is 58,000 kilometers long and you only get to do maintenance to 200 or 300 kilometers a year, the whole network will never be in good maintenance conditions. So we face another issue here, resources. And when we talk resources, we have another issue, which is government policies. And when we talk about policies, we mean, what do the provinces do? What do the officials do? In Córdoba, we work a lot, private and public sector. And So the point is what we can do with the resources that go to the countryside and how much invested. If we don't talk about roads and rural connectivity, nothing will happen in inland. Nobody wants to go and live in inland Argentina or in the farms because there is no internet, no security, etc. So we need a long-term vision here, and officials have to decide how much they want to allocate to the development of the rural sector. Thank you, Franco, for sharing this holistic approach. If we think about agriculture, all roads lead to the ports. So let's talk about the waterway. And of course, what happens here has an impact on the prices collected by the farmers. Let's talk, and we'll give the floor to the next speaker, who has been working in this area for a long time, ports. He has built several ports. So tell us, let's talk about the issues. Which are the features and the problems faced by the waterways? Aapresid has this in the title of this session. Which are the limitations we face nowadays because of the ports or the waterway? Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. The waterway is the main communication path that communicates Argentinian production with the world as a whole. 75% of our exports leave in dollar terms, leave through the waterway. It's 125 million tons a year exported or imported using the waterway. 65 to 70% of the rural production, whether it's grains or processed goods, leave the country through the waterway. 100% of the imports and exports in containers and 100% of the automotive industry imports and exports. So the waterway is very important. And now if we talk about the limitations for a country that wants to increase its agricultural production it's necessary to reduce the logistics costs because these logistic costs have an impact on the goods at their origin, the value of the products in the production area. The equation is price at destination minus freight. So the extra freight costs reduce the price collected at the origin. So that's why we should increase the depth of the waterway. Today it's 35 feet depth, and the large vessels are not able to load all the goods in different ports along the waterway. So we must make it deeper so that the vessels may be fully loaded at the ports along the waterway. This would reduce costs. And we should also include or introduce more technology. Nowadays, there is technology available to guarantee safe sailing along the waterway with information, and this is also important. Thank you, Luis. Now, after this initial diagnosis about the ways of doing conservation works, the official point of view, the government point of view, public point of view, and the issues and problems faced by the waterway, let's see how we can improve how we may improve the current situation. Daniel, the Association of Sustainable Rural Roads, well, you work there, and this diagnosis may lead you to a different proposal. Could you please describe it? How roads or road management could be improved, and if this proposal applies to all cases or only to some specific cases? Yes, of course. well. This is the diagnosis. In 2018, David, I would have said this is a proposal. Fortunately, there are many road managers or operators that have started using the sustainable system, which is similar to what is done in the farms, with very good results, with important improvements in risk reduction. Look at this. Those who are working the farm see this quickly. Isn't this like what we do inside our farms? Plant coverage, different water dynamics, roads with as little exposed soil as possible. It's not the road is not narrower. It's as wide as in the past. But so instead of systematically destroying the vegetation, as was usually done, we promote the growth of green pavement or biostabilized pavement. So here we look at the road, but also the whole area, the curbs with spontaneous vegetation to promote biodiversity, as little exposed dirt as possible, and all the money saved in removing the plants, all that money is going into adding something to the soil that is exposed. This is Villa Luisa. A different diagnosis. Conventional management. In conventional management, the green part would have been a weed to be done away with. We consider this is gold, very valuable. So if 60 years ago we had done a different diagnosis, all those investments we had, all those expenses we had, fuel, etc., all the roads would be stabilized nowadays. Nowadays, with a very small amount of fuel, we have been able to stabilize all our roads. For the conventional approach, these are weeds. For us nowadays, this is really wonderful. When we talk about land management, a frequent question is, does this happen in all kinds of soil? No, just the other way around. What does not work is removing the grasses when the grasses are natural to the area. So removing grasses or weeds is not good in any kind of soil. So look at Entre Rios. All the ups and downs, all the hills. There are lots of rivers. They face huge erosion issues. We attended a provincial meeting, and the farmers by themselves began to reduce and to narrow the exposed area. Carbon footprint. This sustainable system reduces carbon footprint and emissions. In conventional management, we are continuously producing carbon emissions, and carbon capture doesn't take place. Finally, sustainable management means, so we are talking about roads here, natural roads or dirt roads, though other materials may be added later on with this system. First of all, we save huge amounts of money, fuel, repairs, and machinery or equipment, because the less we elements we remove, managers tell me, well, there was a rain, 200 millimeters, and the farmers, in the past, the farmers would stay in their farms, but now they know the roads are better, in better shape. It's like the non-till system. With the non-till system, it was easier to go into a farm after a heavy rainfall. So rainfall is another issue. Talking to experts in land management, with the biased thoughts or ideas I had as an agricultural engineer, I've just turned 71, and for many years, but it's only 12 years ago that I started paying attention to this issue. So we were thinking about what we did in our farms. But when I think about land and water management, we only talk about managing what goes from our farms to the outside area. But after 10 years of gathering information, we have realized that with 15, 20, or 30 millimeters in 30 minutes, there is already erosion, and the soil will move to the edges. The excess water, rainwater, coming from the farms represents a complementary problem, because in year one, 6 years ago, all the roads were at the same level as the farms, and if there was a water surplus, the water dynamics were different from the ones we have nowadays. We have created our own issues, so that increasingly more we have problems with our roads, because we were not properly managing the water. Water was not running off along the natural areas. Now, thinking about the rural roads for the future. What is Córdoba doing, especially regarding funding with the Agricultural Development Fund? I believe this is one of the provinces that has developed a system for continuous funding for the infrastructure with a private-public partnership involving the farmers. How are you tackling this? I believe this is something very interesting for other provinces too. 3 years ago in Córdoba, we set up, I come from the coordination committee in Córdoba. Only 3 years ago, I joined the public sector. We were telling our governor in the past that the only thing we would talk about was the rural taxes. So in the past, we talked to the governor and we asked him what was done with the land tax we were paying in Córdoba. So a special trust was created, and today it collects 90% of the property tax paid in Córdoba. Córdoba doesn't levy any other taxes on the primary agricultural activity. 90% of that money goes to a trust fund, and the trust funds the programs such as the road management, water management, connectivity consortia. So out of that money, so the funding goes to various different programs. And 2 years ago, when the trust was set up, we have a single road consortium, and there is information about it. In these last 3 years, we paved 315 kilometers of roads, of rural roads, secondary roads that have been paved through a private-public partnership approach. This trust is managed by officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Public Works, and farmers come to us and tell us, well, we want to have a road here, a gravel road or a sand road. How can we contribute to this? A project is created, the province funds the project, it is carried out, completed. We require 50% plus one of the farmers who will be benefiting from this road to be involved. And in the case of payments, a paved road, farmers return 50% of the total cost. In the case of gravel roads, they make a more limited contribution. We have already invested $174 million in these projects, and that have involved 7,700 taxpayers, 315 kilometers of paved roads, and 146 kilometers of gravel roads in 2.5 years. If you consider that the primary road networks of Córdoba is made up by 5,000 kilometers, we have worked on 10% of the primary roads network in 2 years with these systems where farmers and the government agree on the main roads, the most interesting roads, and we pave them. And of course, getting to 57, 58 or 60,000 kilometers of roads takes a long time. So I'd like to share this piece of information with you. Some years ago we talked about withholdings, which is the main issue here. If we didn't have withholdings, we would be talking about something else. And why do I mention tax withholdings? Province has contributed since these withholdings were set up. We contributed $3.3 billion as withholdings. If that money had stayed in the province or in the farmers' pockets, in 5 years we would have paved the 55,000 kilometers of roads in Córdoba. So if as property tax we pay half a quintal per hectare, and as withholdings we pay much more, 13 quintals per hectare, where we would, if the withholdings were not there, we would have much more resources to invest in the province, in the roads, in infrastructure. And these, because withholdings have an impact on our profitability. So I've been able to mention withholdings because I believe we should stop fighting for withholdings to be done away with. We have to say this over and over again. I'd rather be charged 2 or 3 more times as property tax so that that money is used for infrastructure works, for innovations, sustainable roads, for example. We are considering this, and there are other products that may be used to stabilize roads, so we would be discussing different issues, but today we have very limited resources, and my colleagues say that what we are doing is really sort of very something that was done in the past, in the far past. But of course, today, as we have limited resources, we can just do what we do, move along with a bulldozer or a grader and moving the dirt from one side to the other. So, but in Córdoba, we have said 90% of the property tax is used for this, and out of that 90%, 50% goes to roads, gravel, sand, paving the roads, and other alternatives. And another issue faced by consortia nowadays and the maintenance of network is the equipment machinery today. If you tell me that the system is archaic, the equipment used by the consortia is not even archaic. It comes from the Middle Ages. So when you say that you have 289 road consortia,
to re-equip these licensors, you know, the cost of road equipment, it's very, very difficult to get to a solution. The problems are bigger and bigger, and so it's the right time to stop the ball and have serious discussions. At least in Córdoba, we know that 90% of the tax collection should be used for solving infrastructure road problems. 50% to this program and the remaining to other programs. But we have included de-wheeling machines, company-owned company, and they use the de-weeders to remove weeds from the edges of the roads. But the problem is also the fires. If we leave grasses growing without any control, we see a lot of fires because most of the rural roads also follow the electricity lines. And when you have fuel and grasses and a lot of plants, these are fire spots. And sometimes the medication is worse than the disease. So we welcome all the solutions. The problem is very serious. I've been traveling around the province of Córdoba over the past 3 years, and our minister says that we have roads of the 18th century with a production of the 21st century. So this, there is a conflict between the two systems. So the province of Córdoba is discussing with the production sector. We do this with the coordination team, and if we allocate 90% of the contributions by the sector to connectivity and rural infrastructure, I think that that will change the view, and that is the view of both the previous minister Schiaretti and the current minister. And rural paving systems in Argentina, I think that that is the very first project, and the engagement of the private sector in managing the funds. What President Milei is proposing today, La Chilena, that is to say contributions by all the parties. In Córdoba, we've been doing this for the past 3 years. Many farmers complain about the beginning, but that then is it was the solution, because we have solved the problem in many roads in Córdoba, and with the contribution of the farmers, we managed to pave many of the roads. The one that strikes me the most is a road of 25 kilometers that was paved in Morteros, in Colonia 10 de Julio, where there are 150 dairy farms and another number of rural schools. And it was impossible to take the milk from the dairy farms and send the children to school. We paved the road, and it's unbelievable how the whole area changed with the paving of the road. And that is what we need to do. And Córdoba is claimed to be the center of the Argentina, but many other provinces contacted us for the design of this system. We reached a level of maturity that allowed us to work with the private sector, because we said that the road infrastructure and the road system is part due to what farmers also do. The possibility of working with the public sector. That is to say, it's not just funding, but also the contribution of ideas, and to acknowledge what should be done by each stakeholder. And when we see the different treated roads, and you see a truck going or taking a cargo of 65,000 tons, it's our fault to load with such a heavy cargo that truck instead of 45,000 tons. So we need to acknowledge our fault, and I've seen farmers that want to make the best or take advantage of all the system. It's a finite resources. Land is a finite resource. It is affected by the wind, by erosion, etc., etc. So we have to address it both from the public and the private sector so as to find a way, because today we produce food for 400 million inhabitants and we will probably reach 600 million, but the production should be exported through the waterway, as it was mentioned by our panel member, but we need first to move it through the roads. The roads will be useless if we do not change the design of the roads. And now let's go to the waterway of the future, right? Because we were talking about the limiting factors and many other things. Well, okay, let's talk about the future, the impact and what prevents us to have a better solution for the waterway. Well, in 2019, all the entities related to the waterway, including users of the waterway, decided to hire a consulting firm and carry out a full study of the waterway, and the proposal was submitted in June 2020 to the Ministry of Transportation. The Stock Exchange of Rosario, the Steel Chamber, Port and Maritime Chambers, the Commercial Private Port Chamber, the cereal exporter and oil industry chambers were represented. All the chambers or associations that use the waterway participated in the study. The study is made up of 3,000 pages divided in 3 chapters: a technical chapter, a thorough chapter, an economic chapter, including the equilibrium rate, and an environmental chapter, which is very rigorous. We can increase the depth of the waterway without significant environmental impact. And also there is a legal chapter for recommendations for the terms and conditions. So the study or this report is available. You can download it from the Rosario Stock Exchange and from the different associations. It is a very detailed report, and the idea is to increase the depth of the waterway. We need to be competitive for Argentina's waterway, reduce logistic costs, and we need to increase the depth to complete the cargo of vessels in the other ports. We thought about 42 feet to navigate at 40 feet. The vessels are incomplete, and then they have to complete the cargoes in other ports in Brazil or Buenos Aires. And it also proposes the use of incorporation of new technologies for navigation, which have evolved significantly, making navigation safer and reducing navigation times and the waiting times. Today, there is a navigation planning system in place which is not very sophisticated. It's almost manual, but today the technology allows us to optimize navigation of vessels in the waterway, reducing costs, avoiding contingencies and stops that increase insurance costs. This was submitted to the Ministry of Transportation, and it's being under review. The report recommends bidding with no participation of the state, because the waterway is licensed by the National Administration of Port. In 2021, the license expired, but since then, we have the General Port Administration managing the waterway, and we want a private licensor with no intervention of the state. That is the proposal. All the deepening and maintenance of the waterway and technology inclusion is paid by the users' payments. The state does not make any payment, and the report proposes an auditor or an oversight entity managed by the state with participation of the private sector in the board of directors to cooperate with the authorities in the use of the navigation way. And what about the impact? Because we have farmers. The fact that we are going to increase the depth, will that result in increasing costs? No, it's just beneficial, because the cost, the price of the products at origin is defined with is defined by price of the product at destination minus freight costs. So if I can reduce freight costs, farmers will get more money. With the deepening of the waterway submitted to the Ministry of Transportation, the estimate is that freight cost can be reduced by 25%, $10 per product that uses the waterway. As you know, the cargo capacity at port for cereals and oil seeds that are exported, we have plenty of port capacity, so there is a surplus capacity available. And also in the crushing industry for oil seeds and soybean in general. So if we reduce the cost of the freight, companies become more competitive in the other parts of the chain. That increases automatically these $10 per ton. It increases the price of origin of the products, and that is a benefit for farmers. Now, just in one short answer, if the farmers win, the users, the exporters, is also good for them because of the logistic costs. The state does not make any funding. And why don't we then implement this strategy? Well, in this case, the authorities should be responsible for drafting the bidding terms. There is a draft proposal, there is a draft bidding document, and now it's the authority or the competent authority responsible, or the one that should propose the bidding and open the bidding to different private companies. And in this way, we could perform the different works, improve the cost not only for farmers, but also the revenue for the country in approximately $10 billion a year. And additionally, by deepening the waterway, if we talk about, for example, container ports or the rest of the international trade of Argentina, container ports will be hub ports instead of being sweeter ports, and that will also increase the import costs. So there is another $1 billion that the state will stop or that the state will get by improving the waterway from container cargo. It's just benefit. The state has not to make any funding, just prepare the breeding terms, and then we have third parties responsible for the dredging. And unfortunately, we run out of time, but you can ask questions after this panel. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to